Welcome back, everybody, to our studies in the criminal law. We are continuing talking about the various different capacity defences that we have available to us within the law of England and Wales, focusing in this lesson on one of the more niche elements of capacity defences in the criminal law. This is the idea of involuntarily being intoxicated, involuntary intoxication. Now, we will get to some of the cases which illustrate this point here, but fundamentally, when we think about defences in the criminal law, and when we think about the concept of intoxication as a defence within the criminal law, we are often referring more specifically to the concept of voluntary intoxication. And that makes sense, of course, given the fact that being involuntarily intoxicated is a lot more rare than people who are actually voluntarily intoxicated. So we will just bear that in mind, that this is a little bit more of a niche and a rarer area of the law. But fundamentally, it's one that has a paramount importance and one that is of a lot of interest, at least in my opinion, when we talk about capacity defences. This is the penultimate lesson on the subject of capacity defences, looking at the first type of intoxication, the idea that intoxication may not be voluntary. We will talk about voluntary intoxication in the next lesson in more detail. So before talking about the nature of the intoxication, i.e. whether or not you are intoxicated voluntarily or not, what is intoxication more generally? Well, you might have an understanding, a really easy understanding. It refers to a situation where you have an individual who has consumed some substance which has therefore impaired their ability to act in a way that they would have otherwise had they been sober. So it is often alcohol or some drugs. If you either take drugs or you consume alcohol, you will become, if you have enough of it, intoxicated. And so it will cause you to act in a way that impairs your ability to act if you have not otherwise been sober. Anybody who is studying this subject, who is studying law at university, would be amply familiar with the fact that you act in a different way when you are intoxicated, which is obviously the sort of bread and butter nature of students in the United Kingdom, fundamentally. And so as a result of which, this is what intoxication means. But then what do we mean when we talk about involuntary intoxication? Intoxication which is not a voluntary act. Well, once it has been established whether or not the intoxication was voluntary or involuntary, the actual legal considerations therein are actually quite straightforward. All that you need to do is determine whether or not the defendant who has committed this act had formed the prerequisite mens rea for the offence in question. This is potentially less likely if the individual was intoxicated. And that's why we consider intoxication to be a defence, because it allows for you to rebut, at least to an extent, the prerequisite mens rea that is required for the commission of whatever offence that we're talking about. And so as a result of which, it doesn't necessarily provide something of a full defence to the acts in some cases, or at least it doesn't provide a defence that is potentially necessarily too reliable, but it is still nevertheless a defence which might be able to rebut the prerequisite mens rea. So, what is the involuntary in involuntary intoxication? Well, it refers to situations where you did not know you were consuming a substance which leads to your intoxication, and so as a result of which you wouldn't have been intoxication had you have known that this was in the drink, in whatever the substance that you are consuming. So, for example, if someone was to spike a non-alcoholic drink, and that therefore causes you to become incredibly intoxicated, you might then act in a way which you would not have otherwise have acted had you not have been consuming out the non-alcoholic drink. There was a very, very strange series of cases that took place in and around the United Kingdom a few years ago, where individuals were at nightclubs and they reported having been injected in nightclubs by individuals. A very, very, very strange series of events that took place in and around there. And this is again another example of an involuntary intoxication. If you become intoxicated as the result of an individual injecting you in a nightclub that you don't even realize, you don't even notice, and then as a result of which you may go and commit some criminal act, then it could hardly be said that you had been voluntarily intoxicated, and so you would fall into this category of involuntary intoxication. So, one thing that is important to note here is that some people may argue that having an alcoholic drink and being unprepared as to the levels of strength of that drink is not a case of involuntary intoxication. I think we've all done it where we have gone out, for example, and we've planned to have quite a nice, calm evening, and then maybe you have a drink that is particularly strong. Maybe you order a double spirits, and that's a lot stronger than you thought, and you become a lot more intoxicated than you were prepared to have been. That doesn't count as involuntary intoxication because you're still voluntarily taking the alcohol into your system. You are just unprepared as to the strength of that alcohol. So just bear that in mind. There's not too many legally interesting cases in and around involuntary intoxication. However, I do want to refer your attention to the case of Crown versus Kingston from 1995. This was a situation whereby the defendant had admitted to having, quote, paedophilic tendencies. However, he argued that he was able to keep them under control for most of his life, and despite having these paedophilic tendencies, what a thing to admit, by the way, despite having these paedophilic tendencies, was able to keep them under control. A third party, we'll call X, had sought to capture the defendant in a compromising position with an underage boy, and as a result of which decided to drug the defendant in order to induce him into assaulting the child. So this third party, believing that this individual was a paedophile, decided that I'm going to get this person very, very drunk, very, very intoxicated, and that will cause him to sort of let out his paedophilic tendencies and result in him attacking or assaulting an underage child. The exact events took place. The defendant was drugged, and then, as a result of the drugs and being intoxicated, had caused him to assault a 15-year-old boy. He had argued, the defendant, that he would not have acted in that manner had he not have been drugged. He was involuntarily intoxicated, and the jury was directed to consider that the drugged intent was still sufficient for intent for the purposes of conviction. The Court of Appeal would then overturn this conviction owing to the fact that he had acted with intention which arose out of circumstances for which he was not to blame. And then this gets then rejected, on the other hand, by the House of Lords, where they say that involuntary intoxication was not open to the defendant where the actus reus takes place with the sufficient mens rea. So even though the defendant had been intoxicated and it had been involuntary intoxication, he had still acted in a way where he could show he had these prerequisites, it could be shown at least by the prosecution, that he had the prerequisite mens rea and of course had the actus reus, and so as a result of which his the overturning of the conviction by the Court of Appeal was rejected by the House of Lords. Welcome back, everybody, to our studies in the criminal law. This is the final lesson focusing on the capacity defences which exists within the criminal system. Previously, we talked about involuntary intoxication, the process by which somebody can become involuntarily intoxicated, either through, for example, spiking of a drink or being drugged. This lesson is going to talk about the one that is far more common, which is, of course, the idea of voluntary intoxication. Now, it's the final lesson, as I've noted, talking about capacity defences. We've spoken about, for example, the defence of age. We've talked about the defence of insanity. We've also talked about automatism. And then, like I said in the last lesson, we looked at involuntary intoxication. This lesson, as I've noted here, is going to be about voluntary intoxication. And as a general general recap from what we did in the previous lesson, asking the question, what is intoxication generally? Well, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, intoxication generally refers to the situations whereby an individual has consumed some form of drug or alcohol, and it has impaired on their ability to act in a way that they would have otherwise acted had they been sober. And when we talk about what is voluntary intoxication, well, once it has been established whether or not intoxication is voluntary or involuntary, we have to think about the question of whether or not the defendant had formed the prerequisite mens rea for the offence. And that's all we need when we talk about intoxication and whether or not it would actually satisfy as a defence. If an individual is intoxicated, they might be able to argue that they have a lower mens rea, and so as a result of which, or they have no mens rea for the offence they've committed, and so this is why intoxication is considered to be a defence. The first thing I want to do, though, is distinguish here between two different kinds of intent. We have specific intent, and we have basic intent. Now, where the defendant has been voluntarily intoxicated, they've consumed alcohol themselves, they've gone and bought some, and they've had some bought by their mates, the distinction has to be made between crimes with a specific intent on the one hand, and crimes with a basic intent on the other. Where there is a specific intent charge, the requirement is that the mens rea for the offence is whether or not the defendant had the prerequisite specific mens rea to commit that offence. Where there is a basic intent offence, the question is whether or not the defendant would have had the mens rea if they were sober. So what do we mean by this? So if I am looking at a charge of a specific intent offence, which we'll get to in a second what this means, I have to ask the question. It is up for the question to be asked, up for the defence to presume essentially, or to argue, whether or not in any circumstance the defendant had the prerequisite mens rea. Okay, simple as that. You have to still show if there was the mens rea present. And if there is a mens rea present, even if you are very, very intoxicated, that would still be enough to convict. On the other hand, when it comes to basic intent offences, you have to simply ask the question, would this mens rea have existed if they were sober? So even if the mens rea did exist when they were committing the basic intent offence, if they wouldn't have committed this offence, if they wouldn't have had that mens rea if they were sober, then we can think about the question of whether or not this actually satisfies a defence. It means that fundamentally, where there are offences which have attached to them a basic intent, say if the defendant, for example, caused some criminal damage, they got drunk and they caused some criminal damage, they did something stupid, as you would understand. All that is needed to show is that the defendant would have known that the action was wrong, and they would not have committed that action. They would not have had the mens rea for that action had they been sober. At that point, the mens rea is satisfied by virtue of the decision to just get very, very drunk. However, when it comes to specific intent crimes, they require the mens rea to be present while they are drunk. Okay, so if you got drunk and killed someone, it would have to still be shown that you had the mens rea while you were drunk to kill or to cause grievous bodily harm. So if you are so drunk that you did not know what you were doing, you would not have that mens rea intent, and so you could not be guilty. And that is simply the distinction. What it means, therefore, is that specific intent crimes, like murder, for example, actually can be defended against by reference to intoxication, because you still the prosecution has to show that you were acting with the prerequisite mens rea while you were intoxicated. And if you were so drunk that you could not have known what you were doing, then this can therefore negate that prosecution. But if you have a basic intent distinction, if you are a basic intent offence, and you can say, well, if I was sober, I would not have known, well, then the decision to get drunk satisfies the mens rea requirement. Let me draw your attention then to a case that illustrates this point. The case here from 1977, of the Director of Public Prosecutions versus Majewski. It was a case in which a defendant had voluntarily got intoxicated, they got themselves drunk, and they decided to assault a police officer. They were charged with Section 47 offence, which is obviously, for those who know already, assault occasioning actual bodily harm. Section 47 of the Offences Against the Person Act. Because this was not a specific intent crime, there was not the defence of voluntary intoxication, since the defendant would have known that assaulting a police officer was wrong if he had been sober. And so the idea here that is presented is that drunken intent is still intent. And so as a result of this, the fact that he decided to voluntarily get himself drunk and decided therefore to go and assault a police officer was enough to satisfy this requirement. Quote, his course of conduct in reducing himself by drugs and drink to that condition, in my view, supplies the evidence of mens rea, of guilty mind certainly sufficient for crimes of basic intent. So when it comes to the sort of lower level crimes, obviously assault occasioning ABH is not necessarily a low level crime, but low level crimes compared to things like murder, for example, you can see here that just in getting drunk, because the mens rea for these kinds of offences aren't that specific anyway, they're basic intent offences, just getting drunk voluntarily is enough to condition the supply of evidence for mens rea, and so the guilty mind is certainly sufficient for crimes of basic intent. When it gets to more serious, very specific intent requirements, such as murder, where the prosecution is burdened with the process of having to actually show that they have killed with intent to kill or cause GBH, then simply by saying that they got drunk is not enough. You have to then also show that they had the mens rea at the time, which means that fundamentally voluntary intoxication is a stronger defense for things such as specific intent crimes like murder, and it is barely a defense at all, if not at all in general, for more basic intent offences.